Have you ever been so sure you were right about something, but you still ended up losing? Well, this is a story about exactly that. It's a cautionary tale, not about being wrong, but about picking the completely wrong battlefield to fight on and the absolutely devastating price they paid for it. So it all starts with a group of landowners. They had a plan, what seemed like a dream deal, really, to develop their land and build new homes. But instead, they ended up in a total nightmare. Somehow, they were secretly stuck with over 600 million new Taiwan dollars in debt they knew nothing about. So faced with this, unbelievable situation, they did what you'd expect. They took legal action. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. They didn't sue the people who allegedly ripped them off. They decided to sue the government, and they lost. They lost big. They lost in the lower court, and then they lost again on appeal. So the question is, why? If they were so obviously cheated, how did they lose? That's what we're going to unpack right now. Okay, so first, how does a dream deal even get to this point? To really get what went wrong, we've got to look at how it was supposed to go right in the first place. The initial setup was actually pretty smart, very standard stuff. The landowners put up the land. A developer, a company called Mingyang, put up the cash for construction. They signed a contract, and to make sure everything was safe and sound, they hired a trust company, Kiaofu, to hold on to the assets while the building was happening. The land was legally put into this trust for safekeeping. On paper, it was perfect. Watertight, right? Well, here's where the story takes a very dark turn. The landowners claimed that the developer and the trust company, the very people hired to protect the assets, worked together, using what they said were forged documents to basically hijack the whole project right from under them. And according to court documents, this all happened incredibly fast, all within 2018. First, the properties, which were supposed to be locked up safe in the trust, were secretly moved over to the developer, Mingyang. Then, almost immediately, Mingyang loaded those properties up with massive mortgages. And for the final step, they transferred the properties, now buried in debt, right back to the original landowners, who had absolutely no clue what had just been done to them. So the landowners find out they've been had. Their property is now basically worthless, crushed under all this debt. So what's their next move? Well, what they did next, it's probably not what you're thinking. You'd think, right, that they would immediately file a lawsuit against the developer, Mingyang, and that trust company, Chaofu. I mean, for fraud, for breach of contract, the whole shebang. But nope, that's not what they did. Instead, they filed something called an administrative lawsuit against the government's land registration offices. They demanded that the government undo the transfers. So just so we're all on the same page, what even is an administrative lawsuit? It's not a fight between two regular people or companies. It's when you, a citizen, claim that a government agency itself messed up, that it did something illegal or improper as part of its official duties. The landowner's whole argument was that the land office was the one that made a mistake by processing what they said was fraudulent paperwork. So they took this really unique legal strategy and put it in front of the administrative courts. The result? Well, it was a consistent and, frankly, brutal rejection of their case. Yeah, their strategy just hit a total brick wall. The Taipei High Administrative Court threw their case out. So they appealed, they took it all the way to the top, to the Supreme Administrative Court, which also rejected their claim. At every single turn in the administrative system, the door was slammed shut. Okay, so this is the part that feels kind of crazy, right? This gets us back to that core question. If everybody can see that a massive fraud probably went down, why on earth wouldn't the courts just order a government agency to fix it? Well, the answer is in a really crucial legal distinction that the landowners completely missed. And the court's own words give us the biggest clue. In its final ruling, the Supreme Administrative Court said this was not, and I'm quoting here, purely a clerical error by the registration office. In other words, this wasn't just a simple typo that a government clerk could just go in and fix with a backspace key. And that is the absolute key to this whole thing. The courts decided this wasn't a clerical mistake they could just order the government to undo. No, they said this was a private rights dispute, a messy, complicated fight between private parties, the landowners, the developer, the trust company, all about contracts and forgeries and who owns what. And that kind of fight, well, it belongs in a totally different courtroom.
And this is where it all clicks. The moment you understand the different jobs of the land office and the civil court, you unlock the entire mystery of this case.
Think of it like this. The land office? It's like a librarian. Its job is administrative. It just records things. It sees paperwork that looks correct on the surface. It's got the right stamps, it seems to have the right signatures, and it just records the transaction. The librarian doesn't read every single book to check if the story inside is plagiarized, right? But the civil court, that's the book critic. Its job is judicial. It is designed to read the book, to investigate the story, to hear all the arguments about fraud, and then make a final binding judgment about who the real author, or in this case, the real owner, actually is. So the land office, our librarian, its power is limited. Like the Supreme Court said, its job is just to check that the paperwork is filed correctly. It has no power, no authority, no tools to launch a huge investigation into whether or not one company is committing fraud against another. That kind of power, the power to investigate and decide, that belongs to the regular civil courts. They're the proper place, the correct arena, for fighting out these messy private rights disputes. Which brings us to the final and most powerful lesson from this whole sad story. The landowners, they may have had the right fight on their hands, but they took it to the completely wrong arena. So what should they have done? Let's just walk through the right way to do this. Their big mistake was suing the government with that administrative lawsuit. The correct first step was to sue the developer, Ming Yang, and the trust company, Xiaofo, in civil court. The goal? To get a judge in that court to issue a final ruling that says, yes, fraud happened, and here's who the real owners are. Then, and only then, you take that court order over to the land office. At that point, the land office is legally required to follow the judge's order and fix the records. See the difference? The land office executes court orders. It doesn't make them. And look, you don't have to take my word for it. The Supreme Court spelled it out plain as day in its judgment. It said that fights like this one, fights about who actually owns land, that's a job for the ordinary civil courts. The landowners were basically asking the librarian to do the book critic's job, and the whole legal system just isn't built that way. And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. This case is such a powerful reminder that just knowing you've been wronged isn't enough. You have to know where to go to make it right. Because picking the right fight doesn't mean a thing if you show up to the wrong arena.